You're sitting in the spotlight, all of you.
I know.
Famous. Can I make a suggestion? We were told that we can't fill up the entire room. Yeah. That people come to, yeah. Just sit closer.
It's working? Good. So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Not too many ladies here again. We were trying to work on this, but one must say that without the lady power, we would not have been here. So, before saying anything else, I'd like to thank three special ladies who have actually brought us here and made us sit comfortably in this nice auditorium. And everything that you're going to see, hear, and do today is thanks to them. So first, Ellie Bain with I2O Water, who's the sponsor for this event, and Ellie has been working days and nights on getting this organized. Maybe a round of applause. Fiona Griffith, who I'm going to be introducing in a few minutes, who's going to be chairing the event today. Well, Fiona's going to get her rounds of applause later, but I'm going to give her one. I think all of us have already been in contact somewhere or another with Rose Wolf, and Rose has really been the power behind.
I'm going to stand up, thank you.
No, you're going to do more than stand up. You're going to come down. You're going to come down because I've actually prepared something for you. I don't know how many people here know, but Rose has been with us for almost since we started, more than a year now, and she has been working very hard, stayed fresh, and yeah, young, of course. I'll tell you a little bit about very briefly about my move. I've moved from the water industry back into telecoms, which is a very interesting move, and more on that when we talk in the breaks. But after I've switched jobs, without Rose, none of what you see here would have happened. And for that, I'd like first a round of applause for Rose. And on the back it says billionaire, which I'd like to be at some point, but inside there's something, and don't take it the wrong way, it says sexy shoe. Now, it's not a shoe, right? This is perfume.
I want two.
You want two? Okay. Yeah, you need two shoes, right? But, I mean, you smell perfectly right. I mean, it's nothing wrong.
Get yourself out of this one, guys.
Yeah, but the sexy part is where we actually need you. Okay, so thank you very much for that. Now, before I hand this over to the people who really know what they're talking about, 2 words about SWAN, the forum, and the activities that we had and we have planned, well, about my role in SWAN. So I see many new faces, which is great. It means we're expanding the cycle. 2 years ago in Montreal, IWA Congress, a group of people got together and decided that the fact that data-driven technologies in the water space do not have a home and do not get the proper representation is wrong, and we needed to do something about it. So a few water utilities, a few industry players got together and founded this thing almost a year and a half ago, and I'm proud and happy to say that what we've been able to achieve over the past 18 months is no short of amazing. The amount of energy and goodwill and knowledge that people are bringing to the table and to rooms like this is immense, and we can definitely do and get more out of SWAN. And with me moving from Takadu, which was my home for 3 years, to Deutsche Telekom, which is my new home, still touching on, a little bit on smart grids and smart networks, not as much water as I'd like. We've all agreed that I'll be stepping down as chairman of SWAN, which I've done with a lot of passion for the past year and a half, and I'll be replaced by, the person who really had this idea to start with, Amir Peleg, the CEO of Takadu, and Amir will be chairing the last session, kind of summing up what we come up with today. So good luck, Amir, and good luck to the rest of the SWAN council and the people who are active. I'll remain active, though slightly less than before. We are here in Birmingham. We're not in London. Last year we had this event in London, and it was a good start to our UK activities. We wanted to change the scenery a little bit and get new people on board, and I see that's working nicely. But location doesn't matter. SWAN is happening in the internet, it's happening between people, it's happening in documents, and it's happening in the, let's say, the collective trust and energy of everyone. I want to share with you 2 places where this is taking place. One is obviously a place that you've seen, that's the SWAN Forum website, and that's like the hub, or the place where everything kind of starts and ends, and a lot of the information, presentations, materials are there. The other is a mini site that we've done with Telefox specifically for this event. And if you don't have the link to it by now, you will receive it as delegates in the email coming out of this event today. And here you can find everyone who's here and everyone who will be here when they beat traffic and join us. You can communicate, download the presentations, the videos, and the photos from the event, which are going to be available. But most importantly, engage in discussions around the things that are going to happen here today. So I urge you to get online and get engaged in some of the activities after the event. And Keith, this goes to you. Where's Keith Wilson? Oh, there you are. This could be a good restart to your online experience. But by that, I want to turn it over to Fiona, who will be chairing the event today. I'd like to thank you all for coming. I'm sure that we'll have a great day together, and the beginning of the rest of the year and 2013, that's going to be a smarter year. AMP6 is coming around. This is a reason to talk about how we make it smarter, and I'm sure Andrew is going to talk about that in his introductory session. So thank you very much, and we'll see each other around. Fiona Griffith is, not too many ladies, as I said, in our industry, but definitely one of the strongest and most influential ladies and people in general in the UK water industry. She's the managing director of Island Utilities. She's actually the person behind TAG, who most of you know, the Technology Adoption Group, and the activities that are really helping utilities adopt technologies at an early stage, at sometimes embryonic stage, and know what's happening and what's going to happen. And Fiona's got, other than her environmental sciences background, she's got a lot of business and taking technology to market experience, which hopefully she's going to bring to the table as moderator, as chair, and as one of the delegates here. So please, a round of applause to Fiona Griffith, and thanks for moderating today.
Thank you, guys. That's a very complimentary introduction. Good morning to everyone here, and welcome to SWAN UK 2012. It really is a pleasure and an honour to be here today, and I'll be coordinating the proceedings for the rest of the day. I was thrilled to be asked to host today's event, and I'm going to be giving a presentation later on this morning which will provide a bit more background about our utilities and TAG and what we do. But today there'll be over 70 people attending, which is a really incredible turnout for SWAN that's still in its infancy. And we've got people that are attending today from all around the world, as far as New Zealand, Israel, Germany. So it's an overwhelming turnout, and really, it's going to be a good day, and there's lots of very interesting sessions. I want to extend a very special thanks to I2O Water, and I'll hand over to Andrew to say a bit more in a moment, but they're the main sponsor for today, so thank you very much for that. We've got a full day ahead, but before we go into the detailed presentations, I hope everyone's got a copy of the conference guide and you can follow things that way, and also some more detail about each of the presenters that we've got. All of the presentations are going to take place here in this auditorium, and there'll be lunch and coffee breaks in the room where we first came into earlier this morning. Guy gave an introduction to me, but I'm the Managing Director of our utilities, and we focus on helping to bring new technologies to market and make sure that they become adopted by the utilities and taken for, and facilitating investment into those technologies as well. I want to stress that today's forum is a very open forum. We welcome as many questions and Q&A sessions as possible, so please feel free to stimulate those discussions, ask lots of questions, and we'll facilitate the feedback and such like. Right, I want to move forward, just conscious of time, and continue with the various sessions we've got this morning. But first of all, I'd like to hand over to Andrew to say a quick word about I2O, and just to welcome everyone on behalf of I2O being the main sponsor. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Fiona. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Andrew Burrows. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of I2O Water and co-founder with Adam Kingdon. I2O Water, for those that aren't familiar with I2O, develop technologies for automatically optimising pressures in the distribution network and remotely controlling PRVs and pumps, and optimising the delivered pressure from pumps and PRVs. So I'm delighted to welcome you to the SWAN Forum UK 2012. And as a founder member of the SWAN Forum, we're delighted to be sponsoring this event and being very active in the SWAN Forum to develop the ideas of how we will develop a more intelligent water distribution network. So perhaps it might be worth just reminding everybody what the big challenges are that we're facing and why we may need a more intelligent network. So just going over what this problem is, it's actually a really big problem, and it needs some very creative solutions to solve it. We have finite resources available, and in some parts of the world they're very much depleting. I know it's very difficult to understand here in the UK the amount of rain that we've had this year. But even in the UK, we have experienced some extended periods of drought, and in many other parts of the world there are very much dwindling resources, especially where water has been reliant on aquifers, which are now very much depleted. So we also have growing demand that's partly due to population growth, and it's partly due to urbanisation. Even in the UK, we've got population movement, we've got increasing demand in parts of the country that are really stressing our water resources. We also have a very much an ageing infrastructure. I understand that the replacement strategy in the UK ranges between 0.3% to about 1% per annum. That's not really a sustainable solution. We need to find ways of extending that asset life. There are commercial pressures. Water companies need to manage their operations more effectively, increasing pressures from shareholders, increasing pressure from regulators. Regulator pressures for improving the quality of the water that's being delivered, the pressures, the water quality, providing our customers who are becoming ever more expectant on having a very reliable service. They expect when they turn the tap on that they will get consistent pressure, they will not get turbidity in their water, they will not be able to taste residual chlorine, etc., etc. Big challenges in those areas. And of course, increasingly in the UK and internationally, requirements to minimise complaints from customers. So a really big challenge, and it's very difficult to imagine how all of those different challenges can be addressed with the existing ways that we manage the water distribution network. How can we address all of those different and very significant challenges without developing new technologies and new methodologies? So perhaps a few words about, well, what is a smart water network? What does smart mean? Smart means intelligence. What is an intelligent water distribution network? Well, it's probably one that is self-organising. And there are technology companies here that are members of the forum, and I think we'll be seeing some presentations where technologies are being used to optimise pumping, to optimise service reservoir control, to do that automatically without reliance on human beings to make decisions. Computers are pretty clever these days. Algorithms can be developed to give consistent technical performance, where with human beings it relies on training, it relies on scalability, it relies on consistency, which is difficult to achieve. So it's a self-organising system where the pumping, perhaps the treatment, the service reservoirs are being controlled automatically. It's self-optimising. That's one area that I2O, of course, are very involved in, optimising the pressures, which optimises the leakage, optimises the burst frequency. Finding ways of optimising energy consumption, finding ways of optimising operational costs in the network. Automatic diagnostics. Many utilities are working in a reactive way. We are reacting when a customer complains to say that they've got no water. We're reacting when there's excessive turbidity reported by our customers in the network. It would be much better to identify that something is going wrong before it starts affecting the customers, to identify that a valve is starting to fail, that a pump is starting, that its thrust bearing is starting to deteriorate, that a service reservoir is starting to get to the stage where maybe it's going to start delivering water with high turbidity into the network. To identify that soon, to identify that a burst is starting to occur before it disrupts not only the customers but also the cities and the streets and our customers that are using our networks. Technologies that enable our operations teams to react more efficiently, pinpointing the problems, so that we can say, you need to get to this valve, you need to get to this pump, you need to get to this address on this street because we think that there is a burst there. We think that there is a problem that needs to be addressed, and to do that very precisely. And minimising disruption to customers, minimising disruption to our economy. Being proactive and not reactive. So smart networks are automatic. They're automatically and optimally managing the network. They're monitoring, they're controlling, and they're doing this in an integrated way. And this is the real challenge, to find a way of addressing all of these different challenges and integrating them together, getting them talking to each other in an efficient way so that water utilities can start adopting these technologies and know that they're going to work together. That's another challenge that we're going to be addressing within this forum. So I'd like to welcome you to SWAN UK 2012. The title is AMP6, the Smart AMP, and the plan, the intention of SWAN is to bring the customers, to bring the technology innovators, the suppliers, the academics, the investors, all together in one forum where we can start to understand what architecture is required to deliver that vision, work on that together, explore the benefits and get the customers to start testing these technologies and presenting the benefits back to the forum. So I'd like to thank you all for attending, and thank the organising team again, and I'd like to hand you back to Fiona now to chair this first session. Thank you very much.
Right, let's move ahead with our first session today, and it's titled Smart Networks, Accelerating Innovation and AMP6. And there's no one better than to kick off today's proceeding than Mr. Mark Worsfold, who's the Chief Engineer of Ofwat, and I'm sure the majority of you in the room are already familiar with him. Mark's presentation this morning is entitled Smart Networks and Infrastructure Stimulating Economic Outcomes. It will review the challenges of the future and what needs to be done to address these challenges, and how smart networks can respond. So, Mark, over to you.
Thank you very much. Not that there is a lot to the presentation. I've gone for a very different format of presentation this morning in that I didn't have time to prepare all of the PowerPoint slides that we needed. So we have a single slide which makes a point, and then we have me on my iPad with all of my notes following it. So I'll be kind of wandering around looking at my iPad and talking to it. Thanks for inviting me here today, and what I'm going to do is give you a bit of an overview of future price limits and what the framework for the next price review looks like. I'm going to talk a bit about stimulating innovation, and then I'm also going to talk about, so what are my views around smart networks and what do I think they are before finally then closing and summing up. As I said, I went for quite an image really, and the image is quite an interesting one because what I thought was, well, what are the issues? And regulation is often talked about as being a barrier to the delivery of things like smart networks and so on. So I thought we'd start with a picture, which is actually quite straightforward. It's a wall, and a wall is often seen as a barrier. And I chose this wall, and I had lots of pictures of brick walls to look at actually. I chose this one for quite a number of reasons, and you can all stare at it as we work through the presentation, and I'll point a few things out. I chose this wall because, well, it's actually quite an old wall. It's quite serviceable, it's still there. It has a few flaws in it. So if you can spot the flaws in the brickwork, you can talk to me about it at the break. But there are some flaws in that brickwork there, and that's actually quite normal. That's quite a normal thing that we see in all of our assets across the water industry. There are things that are working well, there are things that were designed at one time for a specific purpose, but that purpose has changed and evolved, and therefore it isn't necessarily always fit, but the asset's still there, it's still serviceable, it's still delivering. And that's the challenge that we have, is to actually take those asset bases and work with them and make them smart, more effective and more deliverable. So, that's the kind of bit to get you thinking about that, and we'll come back to the wall at the end. So what are the barriers to the delivery of smart networks? And at the end of the day, from a regulatory perspective, what we want is we want the service to be delivered, and we want to continue to deliver economy and efficiency in the way that that occurs. So from a regulatory point of view, there are no barriers to the delivery of smart networks. Let's explore now, well, what does that framework look like for the next price review? And here I'm now going to talk through future price limits. And we published a document, a framework document, back in May. Who's read the document? Dennis has. So not everybody. Within it are a whole host of principles. I'll very quickly touch on those and you can understand what those are. Primarily, in the heart of the next price limits process is the company ownership and accountability of their plans. It's about appropriately target regulation and challenge to the process. Very much a risk-based approach rather than everything within a business plan being challenged. Clear, simple and effective incentives. It's about driving different forms of efficiency, and one of the things I'll touch on is the difference between productive efficiency, which is typically what has been delivered for the last 20 years, and has been delivered very well by the water sector over that time period. And productive efficiency is a reduction in unit cost, delivering a length of main or a service reservoir at a lower cost. But what we want people to do now is to start thinking about allocative and dynamic efficiency, which is actually doing things in a different way. How do you deliver the same outcomes for customers, but actually not have to lay a pipe, not have to do things? And I think smart networks has a real power and a real thing to bring to the table in the delivery of that. We want the whole approach to be transparent and that companies can actually predict what the outcomes are going to be associated with that, and that the tools that we will use will be future-proof and adaptable. So this is very much as well moving away from the price review just being about a 5-year period and actually looking about, well, what does this mean in the long term and what planning needs to occur to go well beyond that time frame. At the heart of it, we have two particular tools. And I'm going to talk about those probably more than well, there are a whole host of different incentives within the framework, but these tools particularly, I think, have greatest relevance to the use of smart networks. The first is outcomes, and we're moving to a position whereby we are going to be regulating on the principle of outcomes. Now, I'll briefly explain the difference between those. When we first prioritised the water industry, we actually measured everybody on activities. Have you laid this length of main? How many reservoirs have you built? In the last few price reviews, we've been very much at output. So have you achieved compliance with the treatment work? Have you delivered safe, clean drinking water to these customers in that zone? Outcomes is actually saying, so what is it customers want? What are the customers and the environment need? And that's actually at a higher level, and that requires people to actually think very differently about, well, what's going to be delivered. And all of our incentives are actually going to be at that outcomes level, which allows that complete freedom to actually look at the different types of solution that can be put in place and the innovation that can be put in place to deliver those solutions. So examples of an outcome would be customers always receive clean, safe drinking water, that water is always returned in a clean, safe manner to the rivers. These are examples of outcomes that people could use and develop. And what we want those to be are very long term. So that's not just over this 5-year period we would deliver clean, safe drinking water. It would be a very long term outcome. Now that actually gets a real challenge. How do you measure success and how do you measure the movement across those things? So within the framework we also have other aspects, and particularly we have things such as measures of success, which are probably more about the outputs level that was previously delivered. But it's up to the companies to set out the milestones that they would achieve as they go, not just over this 5-year period, but into future 5-year periods and reviews about how they will deliver those milestones into the future and how they demonstrate that they are achieving and moving towards the delivery of those outcomes. There are also a few mechanisms and incentives called outcome delivery incentives, which is actually that the companies working with what we call their customer challenge groups, who support and work on behalf of customers through the process, to actually look at, well, if these things aren't delivered, what happens? Yeah? And actually, if they're delivered and they're outperformed, what happens? What are the incentives on the companies to receive returns in terms of the improvements that could have been occurred if they have achieved more than? And if they have not delivered, then what would be returned to customers because that has not been delivered? And there can also be trade-off between those outcomes. If one is outperforming in one area and another isn't, then how do you rebalance those? As long as those are areas to which there is some discretion. If there are statutory outcomes that are required by, say, the Drinking Water Inspectorate or the Environment Agency, then the trade-off of those is going to be less available through the process. And also within there, as I said and I mentioned, is the customer challenge groups. And the customer challenge groups play a really important role in working with the companies in developing those outcomes, providing challenge about the shape and focus of the plans, and also talking about the level of engagement customers have seen and the focus that that has delivered, and providing kind of views back to Ofwat and the assurance that have been put in place around the development of the plans. So outcomes are a big shift and they're a different way of thinking. And I think one thing that will support the delivery of smart networks is that change in thinking. The other tool I'm going to talk about is total expenditure. Traditionally, we have seen and we have looked at expenditure in both the operating cost and capital cost arena, and we've looked at those completely independently and regulated them completely independently. That has generated a series of bias, whether it's an operating cost bias or a capital cost bias, and people say, well, they don't exist, they exist one way or another. They actually both exist all of the time. So we have the operational part of the business who believe that capital costs are free, because it's not actually within their budget. And we have the capital part of the business who believe that operating costs are free because they're not part of their business. But actually what they need to do is talk to each other and engage and deal with the delivery in an effective way. Through the application of total expenditure, the principles are that actually a pound in capital and a pound in OPEX should be the same. There should be no bias between them, and that the company should actually make effective, long-term, whole-life cost decisions about the assets they're working on and the choices that they have to deliver service. So the principles are right. The process of application of removing those biases is a real challenge, I have to say. And we're working very hard at what that process will look like at the moment, but it certainly will be something that we were very focused on and we believe should be going forward. Because at the end of the day, that bias and removing that bias is really important to actually making effective decisions. And it may be quite a long journey for a full application. I can't imagine that people are going to shift from an OPEX-CAPEX kind of relationship to a TOTEX one overnight. It's certainly not going to be the case. And it's going to take quite a number of years to actually work through the delivery across the whole of the water companies and the supply chain. So, that will be a huge cultural change, and we really envisage that that will take some time to do. But the incentive is there to actually work together and to look at those decisions in a very different way. Moving now on to efficiency and innovation. I think people, and I often get people say to me, the efficiency challenge that Ofwat keeps setting becomes a real challenge for innovation. It's a barrier to innovation because we've got to deliver this efficiency and we've got to deliver it very quickly. But the reality is, efficiency is always going to be there, whether Ofwat sets it as a target or whether the companies want to outperform and deliver more themselves. So efficiency shouldn't be seen as a barrier to these things. Efficiency is just always going to be there, and it's something that we all need to focus on and deliver, because at the end of the day, everybody will always want something at a lower cost. That's life. Customers want that, companies will want that. Whether Ofwat sets an efficiency challenge or not, efficiency and the improvement in efficiency will always be there. As I discussed earlier, a lot of our focus has been around productive efficiency, and that's kind of led to a lot of incremental innovation that has been delivered. But now with the move to outcomes and the opening up to dynamic and allocated efficiency, I think we could start to see some step change and transformational innovation occurring, because it isn't actually about how much does it cost you to lay a length of pipe anymore. It's now about what is it that you're delivering to your customers and the environment, and what are the very different ways in which you can deliver that service. And dynamic and allocated open up some very different perspectives in that. So dynamic could be that actually through leakage control and pressure management you can operate the network in a very different way, and smart networks have a great role to play in that sense. But it could also be by engaging with your customers and working with them very differently. If we look at the wastewater networks, for instance, actually engaging with customers around flushable products and fat oils and greases is a way of stopping and having blockages on the network and things of that nature. That is again another form of efficiency. It's working with your customers to achieve the same outcome. And all of those aspects need to be considered as we look at the different types of solution that can be put forward and in place. What will that mean for the relationships between the water companies and the supply chain and the deliverables that they want to do? Well, kind of interestingly, the majority of the contract styles that are out there are very much, and traditionally they have been very much about delivering activities. Some of the contracts, particularly in the above ground arena, have actually got into a kind of partnership arena and have been very much around delivering outputs. But now we're moving towards an outcomes world. So what do contract styles and delivery look like in an outcomes world? How do the supply chain work very differently with water companies to actually deliver those outcomes ultimately, which may not actually involve laying pipe or building treatment works? It may actually be something very different. And that requires a very different contract style and delivery, because if your contract is built up around laying pipe, and you're sitting around a table talking about a solution that doesn't involve laying pipe, then that actually means a very different form of contract. How do you get rewarded for not laying pipe, if that's what your contract's all about? So there's some different styles and contract styles that need to come and change, which is moving to outcome-based incentives through the delivery of the supply chain, a very different way of thinking. So, what does that mean? Now the companies are going to have to think very hard about that in terms of their contract strategies, but also, actually the supply chain also need to think very hard about what are those products and services that they can deliver through that as well, because the two have to come together in a mature discussion about how that will best be incentivised and how that best will be delivered. Moving now to smart networks, and Fiona just gave me a little piece of paper that says 5 minutes. So, thank you, Fiona. Very quickly, if we look at the treatment work side, there are a great deal of telemetry and SCADA and information available at the treatment works level, both on the water and sewage networks. It's great to see all of that, and it's all going into the company's control rooms, and they're making use of all of that information. It is very well understood, and the business processes around that are very well understood, so I don't see that as a big challenge going forward. The networks, however, are in a very different place. And we've already heard a bit on the water side that there's kind of some basic smart intelligence out there in terms of telemetry for basic leakage monitoring. But if we're really going to step up to the customer challenge, we actually need to increase that density of information out there and understand what is occurring across the networks. And there's also a lot about optimisation, high-level grids, understanding pumping, storage, the rebalancing of that across the networks, and there's a lot to do in that, and there's a lot of energy to save through that optimisation as well. That's fairly obvious thing, because there's a fairly immediate return on energy, but I think there are also things about getting the network into a stable position. We've had a few shocks through to, as a result of things like the winters that we've seen in the last few years, and I've been hearing a lot from companies about how do we get the network into a stable position, a calm network, because actually what's coming out is that a lot of the causes of things like failures on the network can be self-inflicted through valve operations and things of that nature, but actually because we're stressing the networks in lots of different ways. How do you get to a calm network, and how do you get that network in a stable position where the impacts are not occurring? But the big challenge there is, how do you get to this outcome? What is the outcome on water networks, and what's the deliverables for that? If we look at the wastewater networks, I actually think there's an even bigger challenge there than there is on the water ones, because actually the level of telemetry and understanding on the wastewater networks is far less. And they behave in a very different way. Water networks, you can move water around, you can optimise it, you can do all sorts of things. The sewage networks, gravity has a great deal to do with it, and you've got very few choices in what needs to occur. But there is a lot that can be done on balance and storage. Storm events, when they occur, as we've seen in the last couple of days, really do fill up the sewage networks. But there's a lot of storage in that, and how can we make better use of that? How can telemetry and control be used to hold water back and hold it back, and therefore the routing through the network doesn't result in sewer flooding, doesn't result in overflows into the river network, it doesn't result in pollution. These are all the things that we want to deliver in outcome terms, but there are lots of different ways of delivering it. And there's some real challenges there about what does that look like? How do you make that occur technically, information-wise, business process-wise? Those are all uncharted territory, and I think there's some real value in doing those things. So I've just touched on it there in terms of it's not always about the technology, it's also about the business process. How do you use it? How do you create the outcome that customers and the environment will see? And from my perspective, and this might sound a little from, because I know a lot of you are suppliers of network and equipment, actually I don't care too much about the piece of equipment. I care very much about how it's being used in the business process and what outcome is being delivered to customers. The piece of kit, in one sense, another supplier could come along, could deliver it at a far lower cost. I always keep saying, you know, if Apple made some of these things, they'd be very different. They'd deliver value in a very different way. They'd probably be more expensive. But actually there would be a very different product there that could do things. For me, it's about the business process, and I think that is where the biggest barrier is to the delivery of smart networks. It's understanding that business process, understanding what's being delivered, and being able to apply it and the benefits that are associated with it. So, when we come back to summing up and the conclusions there, is there a barrier? The barrier is about understanding that business case. It's about being able to present that business case. It's about understanding the benefits, the costs of delivery, the costs of implementation, maintenance, batteries. All of these things have to go into that business case. And we have to understand that. People say, well, Ofwat doesn't approve these things through the price review. Well, actually, we saw quite a number of business cases at the last price review. I would have loved to have seen more business cases. One particular that comes to mind is the Puros case that South West Water put forward, where they were looking at a complete rollout of equipment and kit that works through the networks for the operators, and that was approved through the price review process because the business case was there. They understood the benefits, they understood what was being delivered. So we're quite encouraged to see these things coming through. I'd like to see more of it, but the barrier ultimately is that understanding of business process and benefits. And that is the area that I think takes both the companies and the supply chain to work together to deliver. So, coming back to the wall and finalising, is there a barrier? I don't think there is. Yeah. I actually would like to see business cases and graffiti all over the wall that says smart networks are fantastic. So, I look forward to seeing those, and at that point, Fiona's giving me my turn, I'm going to shoot it. Any questions? Are there any questions?
I think we'll keep the questions.
Okay.